Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. Today, my guest is Gabi Morales. She is a born psychic healer. And today, I want to dive all into what is the difference between being a born psychic healer or tuning into your gifts later on in life. So let's welcome Gabi Morales right now. Welcome, Gabby. I am so excited to have you here on my podcast today. How are you?
Great. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
I am amazing. So I was talking, I just did a little intro about you, and I was talking about you are a born psychic healer, and I want to talk a little bit about that. When did you realize that you were born with this, or were you aware of your gifts or your abilities throughout your childhood?
It was definitely in stages throughout my life.
Okay.
It was very early on in my childhood when I realized that everything I experienced wasn't necessarily everything everyone else was experiencing. Um, that became very clear because I would tell my parents, I see this, or this person is like this, or I see this behind this person. And they're like, no, you know, but it
About not
was
validating you.
no, not at all. And it's definitely, it took, I would say, the first 30 years of my life, it took me to really hone in on the fact that, like I was saying, my experiences weren't what everyone else was experiencing, and then to add on the healer part because what I feel is different from me is I'm not just giving information. What really calls to my soul is how this information can help people heal. How can this help people um, release the heavy energies that keep them in states that are not helpful and access what is actually there meant for them, the divine parts of themselves that we forget is there.
For
So
sure.
it was definitely, I would say, at least a 30-year process of getting there and my own healing and my own learnings and honing in on what I was here and to do.
Did something happen after those 30 years that made you maybe have like a big aha moment or something that or like dropped in on you or something that you were like, okay, yeah, no, this is actually real. Like I'm right and the negations, those they were not right or something like that.
Well, as I got older, a lot of things couldn't be ignored. So I knew that I was, even in my teenage years, I knew that I was interacting, let's say, with different energies, different beings. But it wasn't until I was part of you could say, spiritual cult for quite a long time. And it wasn't until I completely separated myself from this group and that whole process that led me on to the path that I am now, which is all about the soul. And so, even though I had done soul work before to an extent and had wanted to connect to my soul, it really wasn't until I actually let my soul lead that I felt the difference in when our human sensibilities lead, even if you're connected psychically, it doesn't mean that your soul is leading. Because being connected psychically means that you're just knowing how to receive information from beyond your five senses. That's like the most basic thing, which many of us can do without the title of psychic. But when you're bringing the soul into the mix, it's a very different experience. And I realized that a lot of things in my life and in my body actually were starting to break down because the message kept coming in. You got to leave. Like, you learned your lesson, you were here for a reason, you got what you needed, and you have to leave. But because the human is what it is, and programming, conditioning, and comfort is what it is, it took me a while to be
Leave
able
from
to
where?
hear.
From the cult?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
it's okay. It took me a while to be able to separate myself fully from the cult. And it got to the point though where my soul was not having it. It was no, and it was almost as if it took over and I had no choice. And it's really hard to explain when you haven't experienced this, but when you have no choice other than to do what your intuition, what your higher guidance is telling you, even though your brain, your human is kicking and screaming, but there's no other choice than to do what it's telling you to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It's like you
Yeah.
can't explain why. You know it's going to cause turmoil in your life as you know it, and you just can't help yourself but continue doing it. Step into that space of the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
It was devastating. It was frightening. It it was wild. It was chaotic, but it was everything I needed. And in that space of completely separating myself from that place and that community, I spent about 8 to 10 months by myself. I mean, I would go out here and there with a couple of friends, but my life up until then was filled, like so full every moment. I spent all those months by myself, just me, myself, and connecting to my soul and to source. And that is when I was really being taught. That is when I really started to listen in a very different way because spirituality wasn't new to me. The psychic world wasn't new to me. Even healing wasn't new to me because up until that point, like I had already done Reiki. I mean, been attuned to Reiki, things like that. But that's what I'm saying. It wasn't until that when the soul really was like, enough of all this BS,
Yeah.
that my teacher became source full on. My teacher became my soul. And
I
and
love this
guides that I hadn't connected with before, very high guides.
because you
So,
gave yourself the space to actually be with just you. This
yeah.
is so important. I do similar work, and a lot of the clients that come, whatever it is, that's one of the struggles is being alone or being on their own, especially if you're just like really used to always having someone there, whether it's a parent or a partner, that, with not having the partner is so uncomfortable because they're starting to hear themselves that they just need to get another partner. And then that stops the connection of going within, right?
Yeah. And it just keeps the same dynamics and patterns going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because one of the things that became really clear early on is that our soul chose to have different experiences and not in the way that we're often taught of. We're here, like, yes, there are contracts, but a lot of times this idea, at least the way that it came to me, is that it's not these heavy lessons, they're experiences. The heaviness comes from the the inability or the resistance of our humans surrendering to the process. We make it a lot harder than it has to be. Does that
Oh,
make
this
sense?
is gold. That's
Yes.
gold right there. You're right. Because when something happens that is to dislike, what we don't like, and we just deal with it and move on, it goes so much faster. You're so right.
Exactly. So it's, a lot of times the conversation around soul is that my soul is heavy, the dark night of the soul, and I have like these dark, heavy contracts. And that is just the human spin on it. The soul's like experiencing like what we would consider devastation, and the soul's like, great, like it's in its own simulation. It's like, okay. And if you just let it lead, it's so smooth. Even though it looks like everything's falling apart, it's so smooth because now when I look back on that time in my life, I was like, wow, that was amazing. I and it and that's just the difference. It's a big difference of being truly surrendered to the soul. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was that is really the big change, what really catapulted everything to where I am now.
Wow. Okay. So you spend all that time soul searching, kind of, right? And being able to listen to your guys and connect on a deeper level, connect with other guys that you hadn't before. What happens after that? What did you do with this information, this knowledge, this knowing, or this remembrance that you received during that time?
I built myself up little by little. There was a lot of healing that had to be done. I stripped away, I would say about 80% of what I believed. And and I reframed, restructured all of me, my life, my body, my relationships. And so it took several years after that of seeing, of just like trying things on. I felt like I had just left college, and I was like out in the real world for the first time in my early 30s. And it was also a very scary time. But that is, again, when I look back on it, I made some wild decisions because my soul did. And it led me to where I am now. I let myself explore. I learned all these different modalities. I worked with different shamans. I traveled. It was, for the first few years after that, I just let myself go into the void and explore everything. And then after that, it was almost again that voice of it's enough. You you had fun, you did your thing. Now trust yourself that you know everything you need to know and everything else. And then so my life started to unfold in a way that was all about not just incorporating my soul in everything I do on a daily basis, but also being okay enough to be of service again. Because in the before that all happened, I was working with people one on one in like a spiritual mentorship role and some healings here and there. But so it took some time before I came back to working with people. But my work with people now looks very different. And the way that I guide them, the way that I work with energy is very different. So that is what my life has been since then.
Wow. So I wanted to ask you when you were getting to know yourself, and then after that, when you went and started exploring the world from your own perspective, as opposed to what people told you that you need or should have done. Um, did you have any teachers or any guidance through your spiritual journey that helped you confirm perhaps what you were receiving, or was it all or most of it received on your own and you just trust in your intuition?
It's a mix of both. I definitely, as time went on, the level of trust and surrender to my soul has completely increased. And it's still increasing. I'm not at the pinnacle yet. But I have had teachers along the way. Most of them were short-lived. Um, but yeah, there's been wonderful, like I said, shamans and different healers that helped me in my healing, even if it was for a short time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and they're very special in their own ways. Yeah, so I was definitely in good company.
Good. Um, do you feel that everybody or most people have their own different unique abilities that they're born with, or do you feel that some people can learn them later on? Like, what's your point of view on that?
I think that everyone has the ability to be psychic
Mhm.
because we make it really woo-woo and it's not.
Yeah,
For me, being psychic is actually very grounded in reality, you know? Um, the thing that what makes a difference is how open you are to it and your level of dedication to it. Because what I see that gets in the way a lot with psychics is that if they're not doing their own healing, their filter or the way that they interpret the messages gets in the way and often distorts the message.
for sure. I just channeled a message just like that I put in my podcast. It was like, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And so I think that that's what I just see that happening so much with psychics.
Hmm.
Um, we when we're doing this work, we're doing even more healing, then not that we have to be in this constant loop of looking at what's wrong with us. That's not what I'm talking about, but of constantly find not we don't even have to find them because they if we're committed to the work we will be shown, but ways in which we can continue to raise our vibration so that our channel remains as pure as it can be. Because I can't tell you how many times I'm working with someone who has said, well, this psychic told me this or this healer told me that. But when I really look at the energy of it, it was more of a projection
Yes.
of the psychic and more of, and it connected to their own wounding. And I don't want any part, I don't want to do that. So that's why I'm so committed to my own healing.
Hmm.
Because if I'm going to work with someone, I don't want my shit to get caught up in their stuff. I want to know my shit so well that I don't put it onto others. Um, and I hope to God that that becomes a standard that we all live by, but it unfortunately it's not yet. But going back to your question, because I got a little sidetracked,
It's fine.
that
It's perfect.
yes, I do believe that we all have the ability to be psychic. Some people have to work at it a little harder than others. But if someone really desires it, it's available to them. It's because they have it.
It's within, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because when you said I'm a born psychic healer, but then you're not actually doing it or trusting it or using it until, later on, I feel like that's all of us, all of us who are actually open to it, as you said as well, obviously. And just like you, it feels like it's so natural to us. It's like nothing, and so we don't pay attention or we don't give it the energy or the trust that it needs for us to believe in it because it's just second nature to us.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you started healing yourself and begin to lead others through the energy in your psychic abilities, you said that, so I don't want to really go back to like what you used to do, but like now you're like, oh, the way that I help people is so different than before. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is it, how is it that you guide people, the ones who come to you for help? Like, what do you do to help them? What's so different than before?
It's all based on the energy. It's all based on what their soul is telling me, what their guides are telling me, and the energy that I'm seeing. Before, even though I was doing things like Reiki and, like I said, spiritual mentorship, it was all things I learned.
That's key.
Now it's it doesn't matter what I know because the energy, the soul is guiding me.
Yeah, so you completely surrender to the powers that, are not of this three-dimensional world and allow it to just work through you.
Right.
Ah, yes. This just feels like coming all full circle from like your journey, your learning, your studying, applying it, and now it's like, oh, okay, this is where I was supposed to be.
Yeah. And like you said, just surrendering to that higher guidance because, you know, ever since I was young, people would come to me.
Hmm.
And I remember being very little. And whether it was my friends or sometimes it was like my friends' parents or their older siblings or someone in my family, they would just start telling me things. My little brain didn't understand what they're talking about, but somehow messages would come through that would be very heartwarming to them. So there was this sense of, okay, I'm helping them, but I don't know how I'm doing it. And then the other aspect of being told like, well, how do you even know that from another person, like a third person? How do you even know that? Like, why would you even say that? Even though the other person is, you know, so part of it has also been really trusting and not needing to find proof in the outside world that what I'm saying is coming from, divine guidance. So it has really been learning how to just surrender to that, which has was there from the beginning, but I again covered it up with the I should do this and I should be able to prove this and I can't because how can you prove what God says? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's the whole part of feeling separate from spirit, from the divine, from God, because there is no proof and you just have to trust it. And you have all of the very analytical minds, the science minds, who are like, well, where's the proof? And like you're making it up or cuckoo, and then you question yourself, am I making it up? Right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
difficult. This is why I
yeah,
asked you earlier if you had guides or mentorship, because I feel for me, for example, that I went 20 something years playing with the energy and not giving any attention. And it wasn't until I got confirmation from my mentor that I was like, oh, you mean it's real? Right? So this is
yeah,
why I was asking you, like, did you have help with that, or were you able to actually hone in to your knowing so that you can trust it? Because for
yeah,
me, I needed somebody who was like, not my friend to tell me that it was real.
yeah, yeah. For me, it was a mix of certain teachers, um, but I feel like my path has really led me down to trusting my soul and source because I work very closely with God. I say source because it's easier for people, but I God
More
is like
universal.
yeah. But my path has really been big on trusting God
Mhm.
above all else. And so yeah, for sure. Like I said, teachers have come and gone, but it's been expected of me.
So, since you mentioned God with that word, which I know for some people is heavy and for some people is not, which is okay. Again, you take what resonates, you leave what doesn't. You can put whatever it is that you believe in, right? It could be the Buddha, whomever, right? Um, so were the teachings when you were young in your religious grouping and the cult and everything, were those places against, were there teachings against what you do, or did they frown upon psychic abilities or healing and things like that?
Well, I grew up Catholic. My family's Catholic.
Okay.
So yeah, in that sense,
We're
yes.
covering Catholic here too.
Yes. I mean, I have priests and nuns in my family, and it's
Oh,
a whole thing.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also have a few other energy healers in my family, like my aunt and things. So it's a mix, but there's definitely that stigma, you know.
Yeah.
And and growing up in a Latin household, the word um psychic wasn't used. Like, so it wasn't psychic, it was brujita.
Oh, yeah. So that means witch or little witch, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And the word witch here has like a really negative connotation.
Yes, which I love. I love being called a witch because I will call myself a witch. But and I don't think it is derogatory at all. But anyway, for another conversation. But and then going in the cult that I was in was the Kabbalah Center. It wasn't psychic abilities weren't frowned upon, but the emphasis wasn't on that personal connection to the creator, to source. It was more, um, a lot of the things there were manipulated for their own personal gain,
Mm.
you know. So it was like, yes, all this stuff is true, and then, but only follow what I say. And it's cult. Like, what,
Yeah.
you know?
Amazing. I had a question for that. What was it? Gosh, it just left. I had it. I was like, whoops, there he goes. Ask you.
Priests, nuns, Catholicism, Kabbalah.
Oh yeah. So growing up in that space with those teachings, even though you knew inside of you that a lot of the things they were saying didn't make sense to you. I feel like a lot of us are like this. Like we're growing up and we want to be good and listen to the elders, but it doesn't feel right in your heart. So when you were able to separate, spend those 8 months on your own and deliver, I mean, being able to receive what was being delivered to you, um, were you just open to receiving it, or were you scared at first of like, what am I receiving, or what am I hearing, or seeing, or was it more natural, like, oh, actually, this is what really feels good to me? Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah,
This is my truth.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what was scary was the fact that my entire life was crumbling.
Yeah.
I was separating myself from all of my friends, um, the place that I lived in, um, my job because I worked for them.
Oh,
Um, it was everything, like everything. I had nothing. And it was starting from scratch. So that was what was scary. But what was coming through, and a lot of this stuff started coming through while I was still there. And it was scary, and I didn't want to listen because I knew what listening to it meant, which is that my life would crumble, that I would, I can't tell you how happy I am that my life crumbled. So this is, going back to what we were saying earlier, sometimes the experience, we make it a lot harder than it has to be. Sometimes things have to fall away and it's okay. Better things come.
it's so difficult to make that step because we're so used to, even though we may not like it, we're just used to knowing what it's like. And on the other side, it's like unknown. And that, I think that's what keeps so many people in a bad relationship, in a bad job situation, in a cult, right?
Mm.
It's because like what's on the other side? What's gonna happen?
Yeah. I think that also is what keeps people from healing. It's more, even when they know that there's things in their life that are not great,
Mhm.
it's easier to keep choosing that thing, those people, that situation, because at least they know it,
Yeah,
you know?
it's
And
familiar.
yeah, exactly. And yeah.
So tell us, when people come to you for healing, for, you know, whatever it is that they need, that you tune into spirit for them, does anyone ever ask you like questions that are like direct, like, hey, is so and so gonna marry me? Am I going to leave my job? Like quite like straight questions like that, because I know that that's
Time,
like.
all the time.
So how do you handle that? How do you handle helping someone when they're so stuck in asking a question that is very three-dimensional, like really not getting to the core of what
Well, first
they
of all,
need?
I think that most questions start out that way.
Hmm.
Unless I'm working with another healer or someone that has been on a spiritual path for a long time, for most people, their questions are very 3D.
Hmm.
And I love it. To be honest with you, I love it because um it's honest. It's where they're at. But again, what I go into, so let's say someone is asking me, and this happened, this is a very popular one. Is my relationship the one? Is my relationship going to make me happy? Or is that whatever? All those different versions of that question. I go straight into the energy of that relationship, of the dynamic between that person, those two people.
Hmm.
And and that is what tells me. So let's say someone is wanting to bring a relationship into their life and like, am I going to get married this year? And when I look into the energy and I ask that and I keep going deeper and unfolding the energy, what comes through is who do they need to be in order to get married this year?
Oh, that's a great question.
And that is all the information that comes in.
Hmm.
And so that is what the conversation becomes about. And this is why it's a psychic healer. Because I'm not just answering like, can you get married this year? Sure, you can get married. You know, but this is what needs to be worked on. This is who you need to become and what you need to release in order to make it happen. And the only one that's going to determine that is you and your level of dedication to that work, to that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
if somebody is so focused on marrying said person and that person is really not the one, but they're like obsessed with them?
So then we talk about that. Because then when that happens, there's usually a hook, what and or several hooks
Hmm.
into the other, or like energetic hooks, I mean,
Yeah.
or into each other. And that is what we talk about. So, and it could be most of the time when there's obsession, it's a trauma,
Hmm.
whether it's the lifetime or past, or this lifetime or past lives. Or um it's an inability to provide what they think that person is providing for themselves. And so that's, and there's a few other reasons why we get obsessed with someone, but it's all about, just very similar to addiction. When we are obsessed or addicted to another person, we're not in our power. And that
Hmm.
is another thing that I am constantly working on with my clients. Are you in your power? Is this dynamic serving you to be in your power? And when you are so obsessed with someone else, regardless if they're your soulmate or not, but when there's that energy of obsession, the true energy of the connection, the soulmate connection, is not going to be felt or come through, because until you fix that dynamic.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah, because I you see that a lot, and sometimes it's interesting because if you ask, is this person going to be for my highest good? I'm like, it's not the right question, because maybe you do need to go to the trauma for your highest good, and then you're going to be like all upset. Like, right?
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I think that's why I call myself psychic healer because I'm not
Uh-huh.
here to answer, I'm not a fortune teller. I can be, but I don't want to be.
Right, yeah.
I'm here to empower souls.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I and for to help people have that really strong connection and become soul led themselves so that they don't need me,
Yes.
you
Oh
know?
my gosh. I say that all the time. I love it. This is why I love your energy because it's like the
Yeah,
same, like empower yourself so you don't need me. And then you can help others get empowered.
exactly. Exactly. And for all the time frame that you need me, it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
But eventually the goal is that you're so soul connected
Mm-hmm.
that you received your own answers. And when you need help healing a pattern that comes up, that's okay. Like that's why we have each other. I still have a mentor that helps me, when I really am going deep into some healing work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the problem, but I check in with my soul first because the answers really are there.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes it's just our human needs help processing, and that's okay. But yeah, I always bring it back to how we can create that healing, to how we can empower that soul and strengthen that connection. And there's always work. There's always healing work for us to do. And it
For
doesn't make
sure.
us bad people. I think that sometimes when people hear that, the importance of healing or that we always have healing work to do, because I hear this a lot in the spiritual community is, no, we're perfect as we are. There's no healing that needs to happen. We're just, you've heard this.
I
And
have, yes.
yeah, and I think that there is a misunderstanding of healing. We are perfect as we are because we are sparks of God. And we are here for an experience,
Yes.
and healing just it's just about remembering our divinity, you know. But yeah, I always bring it back to that. How is this question? And I'm always having to reframe the questions, by the way. When you're like, no, this is not the question that should be asked.
Yeah.
I know what they're really asking me, and that's why I connect to the soul. I'm like, what's really underneath here? And so that's why I let the soul and their energy, everything, um, inform me. Because the questions that we ask are not always the real questions.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, would you be willing to maybe looking into the energies of the coming year on how to navigate what's feeling that needs to happen so that we can have an easier way of moving through what's coming up for us next year?
Sure. So I will say, and I think I would venture to say that the people listening to your podcast would have had a sense of this,
Yes.
that time is speeding up, that the vibration is raising. And that isn't always comfortable because when that happens, that means that we have to catch up. Our physical and emotional bodies and energetic bodies catch up. So we experience that um, as aches and pains in our bodies or traumas coming up, as I said, either from this life, past lives, also that we can match that universal energy, which is heightening. And what I have felt so far about 2025 is that it is going to be a year where the vibration is raising even more. Because I don't think things are going to be lessening like, it's just
Anytime
not.
soon.
It's just going to be getting higher.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of things are going to be coming to the surface for people. And I urge you to remember that this does not mean that there's something wrong with you, that you have done something bad and all of a sudden things are coming up for you. It just means, thank God, that you're in a place that can now process what was taking up space before. Because whether we are conscious of it or not, when we have unprocessed traumas or unprocessed emotions, beliefs, they're still draining our energy. They're still keeping us from feeling lighter. Um, so this is what I see for 2025, and it's important to, if healing is not something that you feel comfortable doing on your own, I say for sure find someone that can guide you through it, and can guide you through it from a place of non-judgment, compassion, and that knows what they're doing.
Someone who's done their healing already, for sure.
Because you know, your neighbor down the street that loves crystals and does moon rituals might not be the best choice. Um, but yeah, like that, I would find someone and start incorporating healing on a daily basis, and something very simple to do, but people don't like it often, is journaling and just
Oh,
getting
yes.
things out. And sometimes when you're starting to journal for healing, you'll find yourself like, why do I even here? I'm writing, just get it all out. But after a few minutes of just mind chatter, you'll see that more and more starts to come through, and it makes the unconscious conscious for you to really look at.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
that
do.
can
I
start
do.
giving you clues on what's underneath whatever you might be experiencing.
I do see a lot of resistance to journaling, but I also do see a lot of benefit from journaling. I used journaling to heal when my mom passed without knowing. I wasn't in my spiritual journey yet, but I was so depressed and so sad. I didn't know where to go. And I just started journaling. And I remember that every time I would like pour something on the page, I would just cry. And then when I would finish, I would feel fine. I was like, oh, I can go on with my day. And I would repeat this. So I always share this with my audience and everything because it was such a powerful tool that I had when I had no one to go to, or I felt I had no one, I should say, that it's so healing. But even now, I have resistance to journaling. I have a journal right next to my bed, and I do it, sporadically. But I do know the power of it and how much it connects you to your own healing. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, try, see if it works for you. Voice notes. If like writing it down, there's something there, I don't know, there's like a brain something connection to writing it, so it's a little different.
Mhm.
But if you can't make yourself write, I find that voice notes are a good stepping stone. Just say it out loud, and no one has to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. Or talk to yourself when you're walking the dog. I do that all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, exactly. But to release it, to just start letting it out so you can start to see what is underneath some of that for you, you
Yeah, it's
know.
interesting you said, I'm not sure like how, like what, there's something to actually writing. I feel it's because we're living a three-dimensional experience in our bodies, and our spirit is, can be anywhere, especially when we're dreaming or just trying to be out of this world and being out there somewhere. And I feel that when you're writing, when you're putting your hand on that paper with the pen, that you're forcing yourself to be in the moment, in your body. And I feel that's why it's so powerful, because the healing happens in the body. So your soul has to be in your body. You can't be out there dreaming for the healing to happen. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So, Gabby, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience that I didn't ask you or that didn't come up for us today?
I would just love to remind everyone that they are loved, that they are important, that, and really what's a theme that I find myself saying a lot lately to people is to not discount their own kindness. That is so important in the world, and that no matter what we have done, whether it's in this lifetime, past lifetime, redemption, and I say this because redemption is like a Catholic term, but that idea that we all have the ability to be connected to the higher source, regardless of what we have done, is available. So, like, you matter. Doesn't matter what you have done, you still matter. You are still a spark of the creator.
I love that. So heartfelt, amazing. Hope everybody who needed to hear that heard that today, especially, getting closer to the new year and a lot of emotions happen during that time. So I feel this is a very powerful message that you're giving the audience. Oh my gosh, I just saw something more behind you. Which is different because I know you have the filter, but like
Yeah.
I saw something different. Gonna have to go check.
You
So
can tell me after what you saw.
yeah. So Gabby, tell us, where can people go and get in touch with you?
This place is Instagram. Yeah, and then like my link tree is linked on there and I update that all the time. I'm in Houston and so I do a lot of local workshops and women's circles and events and I do a lot of most of my stuff is virtual, but and the link tree and my Instagram has all of that updated. I also have a
Perfect.
few freebies on there if people want.
Oh, amazing. Great.
Yeah.
So make sure that you go on the description here. I'm going to put all of Gabby's information so you can grab it and make sure you look for those freebies.
Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Gabby, for sharing your story, your process, and what you do in the world. Thank you for sharing this type of work with the world. And thank you for
Mm.
being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.
So did I. But thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for being here and staying till the end. If you like this podcast and the information that you're receiving here, I'm asking you to please like, subscribe, and share with other people that you feel this information would be beneficial for them. With that, Happy New Year. I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.